Well, hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Shereen El Feki, and I'm the author of Sex and the Citadel. And I'm delighted to welcome so many of you here tonight for our conversation with Nawal El Saadawi, renowned writer, physician, feminist, and human rights advocate. Before we go any further, just a word about the format of tonight's session. I was absolutely delighted to be invited by the Mosaic Rooms to moderate this Q&A, but I did wonder whether that was quite the right term, because I can't imagine ever moderating Nawal. She is a woman of impassioned opinion. So really my function here is to be a conversational catalyst. We'll get the ball rolling with Nawal, and then we'll turn to you for your questions and comments. We're looking for a very lively exchange of views tonight, and to that end, I'd be very grateful if you could ensure that your mobile phones are silenced. Great. So, Nawal, as you know, is an individual of tremendous honors and accolades and quite extraordinary life experiences. And she is, in fact, a woman who needs no introduction. But I'm just going to add a personal note. I had the great pleasure to meet Nawal in Cairo a couple of years ago when she very kindly invited me to her home in Shubra. But our connection goes back much further than that, because my father was at medical school in Cairo with Nawal in the 1950s. And I asked my father, "Dad, what do you remember about Nawal?" And he said to me, that girl, she always had such strong opinions. Now, I have to say my parents raised me to be a feisty daughter, so in my father's opinion, that's a good thing. But he went on to say, in dissection class, she always had a view on where to cut and how to probe. And I have to say, in reflection, that you began as you meant to go on, because far from the clinic, you have been dissecting and probing Egyptian society and Arab society and the position of women for the past 60 years. So I'm going to begin with a question to Nawal, to Dr. Nawal.
No, Nawal.
But Dr. Nawal as a physician and a psychiatrist.
A writer.
And a writer. But this is my question.
Only a writer.
But this is my question actually about the state of Egypt, and I want to get your diagnosis. Because for many people, it is quite remarkable and quite confusing, actually, that Egypt, from its moment of tremendous vigor and vitality in 2011, has come to this point of almost paralysis of the body politic, quite frankly, and with the most recent symptom of less than 10% or less than 15% turnout in the recent parliamentary elections. So I want to get your diagnosis. What is ailing Egypt today? And more significantly, what is your prognosis for the future of Egypt?
Just before I came, I was at the BBC, and the man who interviewed me from India, and he spoke about his mother as a very progressive fighter against the British colonialism in India, his mother. And then when we came to Egypt and to the revolution of Egypt, then he said, yes, the revolution of 2011, and then the coup. He didn't say the revolution of the people. We were more than 30 million people in the streets to kick Morsi out, the Muslim Brothers. And then we asked the military to come. So he ignored the 30 million Egyptians, men and women, who were in the streets and who dismissed Morsi and the Muslim Brothers, and he called it a coup, a military coup. And I noticed here in UK and in Europe and in the States, they don't see that we, the people in Egypt, we got rid of the Muslim Brothers. They don't give us the credit of that. Why? 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 Why people in Europe and in the United States are so loving the Muslim Brothers and so supporting them? And they say Morsi came with free elections. You know, this man who interviewed me, he told me, because Morsi came with free elections. What free election? I told him there is no free elections in UK or in the United States. I haven't seen free elections anywhere, so long you have money, and especially in Egypt. We don't have free elections. Morsi did not come with free elections. Nobody, nor Sadat, nor Mubarak, nor anybody. And what I am sure of, because I was part of the revolution in Egypt, that we removed Hosni Mubarak, and then the Muslim brothers hijacked our Tahrir Square revolution. I was there in Tahrir Square, and the Muslim brothers, supported by who? They were supported by the United States government, European Union, Europe, and with the Mubarak people who were out. So the internal powers with the external powers collaborated to hijack our revolution in Tahrir Square and to bring the Muslim brothers. So the people went back to the streets and shouted against the Muslim brothers and against Morsi and asked for the military to come and interfere. So Sisi came and supported the revolution.
And Nawal,
so it's not a coup. That's the most... Nobody believed that. I wonder why. Why people do not... And especially, I'm speaking about the left, the Marxist and the socialist people in Europe, in the States, they insist on that.
And Nawal, if you look at how...
Maybe you tell me the reason.
But Nawal, before we turn to that, when you look at how Egypt has turned out today and the great hopes of dignity and equality and freedom of expression, what is your opinion of the state of Egypt today? Is this what you fought for in Tahrir Square?
Not yet. A revolution, look to the French Revolution or the British Revolution. Any revolution, it takes time. And the revolution started political. The revolution in Tahrir Square was very political. And people were keen about removing Mubarak. But there was no cultural revolution. That's why we lost. Because you need political revolution, you need cultural revolution, you need to change the mind of the people, not to change Mubarak or Sadat or Sisi or, the ruler. You need to change the mind of the people themselves, because people in Egypt are frustrated with the political system, but they receive a very bad education. So there is no awareness. And while we were in Tahrir Square, we organized a committee called Raising the Awareness of the People in Tahrir Square, because we had discussions under the tents, and people were not aware. They were out because they were angry, but they were not aware. They didn't have a program.
Nawal, you're how old now? How old are you now?
How old?
How old are you?
Why you ask?
No, because I'm wondering.
Well, I wonder people. How old? What's this? I don't believe in age. Number one.
Excellent. That's very.
I don't believe in birth certificate or death certificate. You are born when you want and you die when you want.
The reason I ask is because, as you say, this change takes time. And I wonder, inshallah, you will live to see this change in your lifetime, but how optimistic are you to see that cultural change?
It's not a matter of the life of individuals. Revolution takes... you cannot judge it. You cannot estimate it by the life of one or few individuals. It takes decades. And it matures over time. Up till now, the French Revolution, did not succeed in France. It takes time. But it will come. Because once the people were out in the streets, it will come.
Well, you're here in the UK for the reissue, in part for the reissue of your books. There are several of them that are being republished. Woman at Point Zero, God Dies by the Nile, The Hidden Face of Eve. These are, I hesitate to use the word seminal books because I know your views on the patriarchy, but let's call them, these are the foundational texts of examining the status of women in Egypt, and also, fascinatingly, the connections between the personal and the political. I know that these are just some of, more than 40 books that you...
All my books?
Yes.
In Arabic or in English? 56 books.
And
56, but it's not a matter of quantity.
No, but
because I'm writing since I was a child.
But I gather they've also been translated into more than 30 languages.
40
languages.
Yes.
Okay. So my question for you is, do you find that readers in different parts of the world have different responses to your books?
Readers. Not very much. Governments. My problem with governments, not with the people. The people, they like my books. When I travel to Indonesia, to Japan, to China, to UK, so the people are the people, and people, they read my books, they love it, they discuss it. But the problem is with the official action and reaction to my work from in the West and in the East, all over. It's not matter related to censorship in Egypt, because censorship is universal. We live in one world. We do not live in 3 worlds. No, there is nothing called third world. We live in one world, and the global is inseparable from the local. So we live in one world. We're dominated by the same capitalist, colonial, patriarchal, religious, racist system, military system, police system, the same system. So that's the system who I suffer, who is against any work. But the people, the people, especially the young people, of course, there are I'm not with the age criteria, but young people, they like it because it's very, very radical somehow.
Well, that's a question I wanted to ask you, because the books that are reissued, you wrote in the 1970s.
Yes. Early 70s, very early 70s.
And in fact, there have been multiple generations who have come to your books. Your generation, my generation, and then the next generation as well. And I wanted to see, have you seen different responses to your books from different generations of readers?
Yes. The younger. Now in Egypt, there is a very nice phenomenon that is really giving me I am becoming younger with them, because when I live with young people, I become younger. So those young people whom I met before Tahrir Square, before 2011, and in Tahrir Square and after that, we are never separated. And they formed now what it's called Nawal El Saadawi Forum. This could not have happened before under Mubarak or Sadat or anybody to organize something with my name. Forum. So, and it's a revolution. It is a cultural revolution, what the young people are doing. Every month, one of them summarize one of my books, and then invite me for the seminar every month, and they read, he or she read the paper which he or she wrote about my book, and then we discuss. Every month we do that. And hundreds of young people come. So it's a phenomenon, and we discuss freely, against religion, against politics, against everything. So, of course, maybe in the future they will close it, they will ban it, I don't know. But up till now, it's almost 1 year now. Every month they are so this is a phenomenon.
How does that compare to the discussions you were having when the books were first published? What is the comparison of the discussions?
Well, my book's Woman at Point Zero was not accepted at all, even from feminists, women feminists. Amina Said, maybe she was the head of a magazine in Egypt called Hawa, means woman. And she was the editor in chief. When I wrote this novel, early 70s, exactly 1973, because I was dismissed from my work in the Ministry of Health in 72. So I started this research on women and neuroses, where I met Firdaus in prison. So I wrote the novel, and I sent it to Amina Said, because she was the most progressive woman at that time. And she said, "What's that? What are you writing? About this prostitute? You are making a prostitute an honorable woman? I can't publish that." She refused. And of course, men refused it. So she didn't publish. She didn't want to publish it because I wanted to publish it in her magazine, Hawa. And nobody wanted to publish it in Egypt. So I had to publish it in Beirut in 1973. So the reaction, even from the most progressive women, was negative.
I'd like to actually turn to the audience for a moment, because we have a very diverse group here tonight, and we have multiple generations of readers here. So I'd actually like to hear from you through the generations how Nawal's work has spoken to you, actually. If you could tell us just one way in which her works resonate with your life and your situation. And I'd like to begin with the newest generation, anyone under 25 who might like to share just one way in which Nawal's work has spoken to you. I'll tell you what, I'll give them some time to reflect, and we'll come back to you.
Yes.
But we do want to hear
I noted that because I was here in London in March and April. I was here for 2 weeks. And the audience were young people. And I see here in the hall that most of them are young people also.
Or young at heart.
Yes, most of them.
Do you see any change in the taboos and the constraints on female sexuality from what you wrote in the 1970s to what I've written about and what you see today in Egypt?
Well, I don't speak about sexuality separate from politics. And that's my criticism of feminism. In American feminism or British feminism, or books about women in the Arab world talking about sex, separate from politics and economics and all that. So this link is very important, because many publishers are not interested in women except if you speak about sex. If you don't speak about sex, or if you don't put the title sex like that, so it's related to sex. But in fact, the sexual oppression of women is universal. It's universal because it's related to patriarchy, to capitalism, to religions, Christianity, Judaism, Islam. The three religions oppress women severely. But they link it to Islam only. So, in a way, it's a matter of also methodology, when it's a matter how you do your research, whether you link sexuality to politics and to economics or not.
As you will find
you
in
that
Sex
in
and the
your
Citadel.
Work. Very good.
Yes, because I met you, and Nawal may not recall, I met her while I was researching Sex and the Citadel, and she set me on the right path, to be sure. But Nawal, my question to you is that all the trammeling of female sexuality, the use of sexuality allied with economics in the patriarchy to suppress women and also men, do you see any change in the younger generation pushing against those controls?
Well, there are mainly two trends. For instance, my daughter is much more radical than me. Yes.
How is that possible?
Well, she's much more radical, of course. Because if she's not more radical than me, then I am a failure. Of course, generations who read my work or read other radical work, they become more radical than us. That's progress. It's logic. It's logic. So my daughter is very radical. And she did what I never did. And she is very, very independent. And there is a trend in society, like my daughter and my granddaughters and my grandsons. And there is a trend that are very radical. And they will change. They will be the future. But there is another trend affected by the colonial Islamic, American Islamic, the Americanization and the Islamization. I do not separate between the Americanization and the Islamization of our world, especially our region. Because people tend to separate between the Americanization and the Islamization. They go hand in hand. Even the Daesh, or the so-called Islamic State, and Qaeda, and Boko Haram, and Taliban, they are all manufactured and financed and received weapons from colonial rules in the US and in Europe. So we should be aware of that. And that's the trend that obliged women to put on the veil. The veiling under Sadat, in fact, it started under Reagan-Sadat period. Reagan-Sadat, 70s, early 70s. This Islamization and Americanization of Egypt and Iraq and even here, many places. So religion started. The phenomena of religious fundamentalist groups is universal. Started with the early 70s. So this affected the trend, the other trend that is going backward. 90% of women in Egypt are circumcised and veiled. So the percentage is increasing.
Just on that point, though, about circumcision, the most recent data from Egypt shows that actually there has been a decline in circumcision amongst 15 to 17-year-olds. It's now declined to about 2/3, which is very high, unacceptably high. But there has been progress there. And you have written, you wrote in Hidden Face of
We have a law. The government issued a law in 2008 against female circumcision. Do you think that the percentage was less after the law?
No, I don't think it's just the law. And you make this point, you make this point in your book,
so
that law is not enough.
The law did not change it. So women, more than 90% of women in Egypt are circumcised. It goes with the veil. Circumcision go with the veil.
But also
with the veiling.
But also in parts of Cairo, for example, we are seeing a phenomenon of unveiling, that some women are now finding...
After the revolution, yes. After the 2011 revolution, young women started to unveil. But the Muslim Brothers came. Now we have a struggle, a big struggle against women and against the revolution. So Egypt is not left alone. We are part of the global system. And, the area is very important for colonial powers, the oil and also Israel. Israel in our region, the only state that has nuclear military power is Israel. We are not allowed to have nuclear power even for medicine. For medicine, we cannot use nuclear scientific power. But Israel is the only state that is allowed by colonial powers, by US and Europe. Israel is the only state that is allowed to have nuclear power.
Iran. No
No, Iran doesn't have, and they created a lot of problem for Iran, and now they made that Iran will not continue, but Iran doesn't have military nuclear weapons. I'm speaking about military nuclear weapons. Israel, and everybody know that, and they approve it. They approve it.
If we turn to even more explosive issue, which has to do with, again, we're talking about circumcision, the emphasis on virginity, female virginity, the double standards that control women through their minds and their bodies. You talk very fascinatingly in your books about how you were raised and the double standards that you were exposed to. But you've just mentioned your daughter, Mona, and also you have a son. And I'm interested to know, how did you raise your children differently to your own upbringing?
Well, it was not me alone. We were a trend because my father, in fact, represented a generation of men who was very broad-minded. He sent me to the medical college, when I was very young. Of course, my father and mother had problems, and they wanted to marry me when I was 10 years. Of course, there was limitation, but he was very much believing in education of girls, that a girl should be educated like a boy to earn her living. So in Egypt, there was a generation, maybe your father or your grandfather was one of them, who really encouraged girls to be educated. This was during the 40s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. But then, with Sadat, with the open door policy, everything came down. In fact, education came down, everything, veiling of women. And so my father and my mother and my grandmother, who was a peasant, she was very progressive relative, though she was illiterate. But she gave me the first lesson in religion and in philosophy, because she didn't believe in the Quran. My grandmother, she never read the Quran. And the mayor accused her that she's not a good Muslim. And he told her he was carrying the Quran like that in his hand. And he telling her, you do not know God. You do not know Islam because you didn't read the Quran. And she was a peasant, and she told him, who told you that God is the Quran? Who told you that God is a book that comes out of the printing machine? God is justice, and we know him by our mind. So this is a philosophy of illiterate people who never read books, but they believe in justice, that God is a symbol of justice, not a book. So that's how I was brought up among this grandmother, and about my mother, who was she told me there is no hell, so she, yes, because the teachers in school, education is a disaster all over, because when you are a child, they make you afraid of the hell, that God will burn you. So the teachers, because I was an intelligent small girl, and I used to ask them questions, etc., so they didn't like that. So they said that I will go to hell and I will be burned. So I went crying to my mother at home, and she told me, your teachers are ignorant, there is no hell. She told me there is no hell. So she liberated me of the fear that kills the mind of young children. That's my mother.
And Nawal, putting this into practice with your own children, because still in many families in Egypt, the boys are raised to be thought of as better than the girls. They have more freedom than the girls. And it's often the mothers, it's not necessarily the fathers who are imposing it, it's often the mothers who instill the patriarchy. They uphold the patriarchy. So in your own children, what is the key thing that you did differently to level the playing field between your daughter and your son?
Of course, they were equal. And my My daughter, she has PhD in political economy, but she threw her PhD in the garbage and she started writing poems and poetry and writing stories. She loves literature and creativity. So she is combining her scientific studies with creativity. My son also graduated from engineering, and now he's a film director. So both of them were brought up in a very free family. And I encourage them when they are doing very well creative work. We encourage them. When they are not doing, we tell them. So they were treated equally, exactly, equally.
I'm fascinated about your son, because in your books, quite frankly, men do not come off as beacons of enlightenment. Quite frankly, they are venal, they are power hungry, they are violent. But what's most interesting is your observation of just how insecure they are. That men behaving badly often comes because of their fear of women's power.
Yes. Why?
Yeah.
Why? The problem.
Well, why? We'll turn that over to the men in the room for a bit later.
But not because they are men. But we can talk about that.
Yeah. But my question to you, and it's really fascinating how you link a lot of this to a sense of honor. Now, honor is not a term one hears very much in the West anymore. But when you look at men in Egypt today, do you think honor is still important, an important principle for them?
Yes. This is related to the name of the father. I think the problem of the world, and especially of our countries, because we are stuck in this conception, patriarchy. Patriarchy means the name of the father. What do we mean by patriarchy? It means simply the name of the father. And here in England and everywhere, children take the name of the father. So all types of oppression of women, whether sexual or economic or circumcision or veiling, was to diminish the sexuality of women to fit with the monogamous system. Because women should be monogamous. A woman should marry only one man. And her husband should not suspect that she has a relation with another man. Because the minute he is suspicious of that, then the name of the father will be in doubt. So patriarchy is built that men, not men physically because they are men because of this patriarchal system, fatherhood should be known. Fatherhood, in ancient Egypt, we had our female goddess Isis, and we have our goddess of justice Ma'at, and even a goddess of medicine, Sekhmet, the goddess of medicine, Sekhmet. Why women were so highly elevated, and they even were goddesses, and the head of the medical syndicate was a woman. Why? And then why women came down from Isis, the symbol, she was the goddess of knowledge and wisdom. So, from the symbol of knowledge and wisdom, women came down to be Eve, the sinner, the devilish, and knowledge was a sin, became a sin. This is related to the name of the father, to patriarchy, that children should have the name of the father. In ancient Egypt, children took the name of the mother, and fatherhood was not known. Men they had multiple sexual relationships, and women had multiple sexual relationships. So they were equal in this freedom, sexual freedom. But with patriarchy, men continued to be polygamous and free, and women were restricted by monogamy so that the name of the father should be known.
Now, well, you make a fascinating point in your books that, particularly now in a modern age where men find it increasingly difficult to realize their manhood because of economics, they're unable to get jobs, because of the political system, which is highly authoritarian and deprives them of their masculine power of protecting their families, that effectively, at the end of the day, honor for men comes down to the bodies of women. You talk extensively of how women today are pushing back against these constraints, but what hope do you see for men in joining the struggle?
Of course, because any man, if you ask any man, men who are intelligent, they like women who are intelligent. Men who are free, they like women who are free. My son, for instance, cannot marry a veiled woman. Cannot. Because he cannot live with a slave. Even she is worshipping him. An intelligent man doesn't want a woman to worship him or to serve him. He needs a human being to share with him. You see? So there are many men against patriarchy because of that. Because they were liberated from the so-called manhood. This false manhood based on the name of the father and the honor and all that. So they got rid of that, and they became human beings.
But these men are still, sadly, on the margins. How do we move them to the mainstream?
They are increasing. Oh, they are increasing. To my astonishment, this Nawal El Saadawi forum, most of them are young men. You see? So they are increasing.
And also in the recent movements against sexual harassment on the streets of Cairo, there are young men as well in these groups. So there is hope for men yet, I think, in Nawal's opinion. You heard it here first.
Well, I do not divide people by the genital organs. I don't say these men, I don't divide them by the genital organs, men and women. I divide them by their brain. Margaret Thatcher was a woman. Hillary Clinton, a woman. Angela Merkel, women. They are very patriarchal, more patriarchal than men. So it's a matter of the brain. And here's the role of the mother. How the mother educates her son in a way to be a human being.
Absolutely key.